देव्याय प्रियाय केसरस्य च विष्णु भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः।
Jai Tulsi Maharani. Okay, time for class. Any part of the Bhagavatam you want to read today, or? What?
Up to you, Gurudev.
Up to me, Gurudev. All right, let's chant. Let's chant Jai Radha first. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jana Malabat Giri Badhari Gopi Jana Malabat Giri Badhari Gopi Jana Malabat Giri Badhari Gopi Jana Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tera Manachari Yamuna Tera Manachari Vishnupad, Paramahansa Paravidikacharya, also Teta, Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace Sabaya Chananada Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anandakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shitwaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopika Sayam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Maturanam Ki Jai, Jagannath Swami Ki Jai, Yamunamai Ki Jai, Shrimati Devi Ki Jai, Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Hari. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Om Vishnupadaya, Krishna Pastaya Budale, Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Chinamani, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaur Vani Pacharni, Devashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatar. So, what we're going to read from is the continuation of our class from Fiji, from Suva, because we just came from, actually we came Nandi, but we didn't have any Bhagavatam classes there. So, because we just spent a day or two there. So, Suva, we were reading from the first canto, the 12th chapter, and we're up to the 26th text in that chapter. All right. So, 1:12:26. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So, some of you have that, 1:12:26. So, I guess we can do it repetitively. Rajarshinam
Rajarshinam
Janayata.
Janayata.
I can still reach it from now. Shasta,
Shasta,
Chotpata,
Chopata,
Gaminam,
Gaminam,
Nigrahita,
Nigrahita,
Haler,
Haler,
Esha,
Esha,
Bhuvo,
Bhuvo,
Dharmasya,
Dharmasya,
Karanat,
Karanat,
Rajarshinam Janayata,
Rajarshinam Janayita,
Shasta Chotpata Daminam,
Shasta Chopata Gaminam,
Nigrahita Kaleresha,
Nigrahita Kaleresha,
Bhuvo Dharmasya Karanat,
Bhuvo Dharmasya Karanat,
Rajarshinam Janayata,
Rajarshinam Janayita,
Shasta Chotpata Daminam,
Shasta Chopata Gaminam,
Nigrahita Kaleresha,
Nigrahita Kaleresha,
Bhuvo Dharmasya Karanat,
Bhuvo Dharmasya Karanat,
Rajarshinam Janayita,
Rajarshinam Janayita,
Shasta Chotpata Gaminam,
Shasta Chopata Gaminam,
Nigrahita Kaleresha,
Nigrahita Kaleresha,
Bhuvo Dharmasya Karanat.
Bhuvo Dharmasya Karanat,
Okay.
Rajarshinam Janayita,
Rajarshinam Janayita,
Shasta Chopatagaminam,
Shasta Chopata Gaminam,
Nigrahita Kaleresha,
Nigrahita Kaleresha,
Bhuvo Dharmasya Karana,
Bhuvo Dharmasya Karanat,
Rajarshi Rajarshinam Janayita
Rajarshinam Janayita
Shasta Chotpatagamina
Shastratopatgamina
Nigrahita Kaliresha
Nigrahita Kaleresha
Bhuvo Dharmasya Karana
Bhuvo Dharmasya Karana.
Ladies, or anyone else? No?
Rajarshinam Janayita
Rajarshinam Janayita
Shasta Chotpatagamina
Shastratopatgamina
Nigrahita Kaleresha
Nigrahita Kaleresha
Bhuvo Dharmasya Karana
Bhuvo Dharmasya Karana.
Rajasinam Janayeta
Rajarshinam Janayeta
Shasta Chopatagamina
Shastratopatgamina
Grahita Kaliresha
Nigrahita Kaleresha
Dharmasya Karana
Bhuvo Dharmasya Karana.
Okay. Rajarishinam, of kings as good as sages. Janayita, producer. Shasta, chastiser. Cha, and. Utpatagaminam, of the upstarts. Nigrahita, molester. Kale, of the quarrelsome. Esha, this. Muva, of the world. Dharmasya, of religion. Karanat, on account of. Translation: this child will be the father of kings who will be like sages. For world peace and for the sake of religion, he will be the chastiser of the upstarts and the quarrelsome. So purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The wisest man in the world is a devotee of the Lord. The sages are called wise men, and there are different types of wise men for different branches of knowledge. Unless, therefore, the king or the head of the state is the wisest man, he cannot control all types of wise men in the state. In the line of royal succession in the family of Maharaj Yudhisthira, all the kings, without exception, were the wisest men of their times. And so it is also foretold about Maharaj Parikshit and his son, Maharaj Janamejaya, who was yet to be born. Such wise kings can become chastisers of the upstarts and uprooters of Kali, or quarrelsome elements. As will be clear in the chapters ahead, Maharaj Parikshit wanted to kill the personified Kali, who was attempting to kill a cow, the emblem of peace and religion. The symptoms of Kali are 1, wine, 2, women, 3, gambling, and 4, slaughterhouses. Wise rulers of all states should take lessons from Maharaj Parikshit on how to maintain peace and morality by subduing the upstarts and quarrelsome people who indulge in wine, illicit connection with women, gambling, and meat eating supplied by regularly maintained slaughterhouses. In this age of Kali, regular license is issued for maintaining all of these different departments of quarrel. So how can they expect peace and morality in the state? The state fathers, therefore, must follow the principles of becoming wiser by devotion to the Lord, by chastising the breaker of discipline, and by uprooting the symptoms of quarrel as mentioned above. If we want blazing fire, we must use dry fuel. Blazing fire and moist fuel do not go ill together. Peace and morality can prosper only by the principles of Maharaj Parikshit and his followers. Again, the verse. Excuse me. Rajarshinam Janayata Shastra Chotpatagaminam Nigrahita Kaleresha Bruvo Dharma Shakaranat. So Omaganat Timirandasha Ananjana Silakaya Chakshur Unmeditam Yena Tasmai Shigure Namaha. So the first so the first verse, the first Sanskrit words here are excuse me, are Raja Rishinam, which means of kings as good as sages. So we find that the kings were appointed, or a little bit maybe. I should have taken my cough drops this morning. Okay. The kings were appointed by the Brahmins, even though in the Vedic system there is the rule of what's called primogeniture. You've heard of primogeniture before? Mm-hmm. Genitor means birth. Primo means like first. So generally there was the rule that the oldest of the sons of the king would actually become the king. Now you may ask, why the sons of the king? Why can't it just be any ordinary citizen? That's an interesting question. Well, the reason is, not according to the modern day and age, but the reason is the kings were bred. It's called eugenics. Of course, that's really a politically incorrect word nowadays. But, we do that with plants, don't we?
We do.
We do that with trees, we do that with plants. So the kings were bred, they weren't sent to like a artificial insemination place and bred in that way, and test tubes and things like that. That's not what I'm talking about. The kings were bred in the sense that the marriages were arranged in such a way that you have proper offspring. Therefore, generally, people had to marry people of the same caliber. And it was much more compatible. Of course, in the Vedic system, it was allowed sometimes for a higher class man to marry a lower class woman. What I'm talking about is the Brahmin could marry the Kshatriya lady, or the Kshatriya lady, a Kshatriya man could marry a Vaishya woman, but you couldn't have vice versa. You couldn't have like a Brahmin lady marrying a Kshatriya man. It was problematic. And I'll give an example that we talked about the other day in class. There was King Yayati. Everyone's heard of King Yayati before? He was a great king, and somehow or other, I'm not going to tell the whole story, how he married Devayani, who was a Brahmin, daughter of Shukracharya. Okay? And so Devayani, when she got married to Yayati, it's the whole story of why she had to marry Yayati. But anyway, when she got married to Yayati, one of her friends, or several of her friends, accompanied her. And one of them was called Sarmishta. Some of you may have heard this story. So what happened is that once upon a time, Sarmishta, who was just a friend of Devayani, was supposed to be Devayani's servant, and was prohibited from having any sort of intimate contact with King Yayati, was able to lure King Yayati into having a relationship, and as a result, 2 kids were born. Actually, 3 kids, sorry. 3 kids were born. So when Devyani heard about this, remember she's the Brahmin girl, and Samishta is the Kshatriya girl. She was the daughter of King Vrishaparva. So anyway, so when Devyani heard about this, she went to her father and complained, and what happened is King Yayati lost his youth. And eventually, of course, he got back his youth by getting it from his dear son Puru. We were talking about this the other day, and I asked the devotees if anyone was willing to give their youth for me. Later on, I got an email message, yes, I'll do it, Guru Maharaj. I said, no thanks. I don't want to be a young lady. So anyway, none of the men volunteered, one of the ladies volunteered. So unfortunately, none of the men volunteered. So anyway, so the point is, because you had different castes there, which is called pratilom marriage. When you have a woman from a higher caste marry a man from a lower caste, it's problematic. But generally, people should be the same caste for compatibility. And we're not talking about hereditary castes. You know, I know people nowadays sometimes get into these crazy caste distinction things. I had one friend, not going to mention his name, one friend, his parents insisted that he had to marry a girl of the same caste, the same subcaste, and the same sub-subcaste. You know, pretty slim pickings, as they say. Understand, slim pickings. And finally, they found someone who, after doing a computerized search of the whole world, of someone of the same sub-caste, and the marriage didn't work. It was a disaster. Because they didn't consider actual caste is Chaturvarna Maya Shishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. The guna and karma, the qualities and work, not what one is born with. So anyway, getting back to the point, not only was the king married, or the prince, sorry, at this particular point, married to a girl of the same caste so there would be suitable offspring, but actually the girl's qualities and the king's qualities were examined even within the same caste. That's why, of course, nowadays it's sort of perverted. Sometimes in the marriage ceremony, before the marriage ceremony, the mother of the husband or the prospective husband will actually physically examine the girl. I've seen that happen in India. You heard about that before? You know, like she's a doctor or something like that. So that's a perverted expression of what we used to happen with the examination. So anyway, so what happened is that when you had the proper breeding, you got the proper type of person. You know, we may say, of course, it's not just the family, it's the qualities of a person, as I mentioned before. So it's not just they have to come from a good family, but they have to have certain qualities. So we may say, ooh, this is so cruel. What about love? It's interesting. Actually, some of the best marriages I've seen with people have been arranged marriages. And some of the worst marriages have been the love marriage. But of course, the girl and the boy always have a right to say no. That's what Swayamvara means, literally. That the girl picks it.
Yeah.
It's not that she's just like some prize. Like yesterday, kind of went to a debate contest, right? So maybe he won a prize or something like that. No, he didn't win a prize. You have prizes? Or? So it's not that the girl was a prize for shooting the arrow in a certain way. Just like when Karna came up to compete in the assembly, you know, they had to take the bow and arrow and shoot through the eye of a fish that was like above, and he had to look at a pool of water below. Draupadi had the right to say no. So there wasn't forced upon people. But being a king was a great responsibility. So you actually have to sacrifice many of your rights to be a king. Because you have to consider all the citizens just as important or more important than your family. Like we see in the case of Lord Ramchandra. He sent Sita Devi away. I mean, it's actually very cruel. It's one part of the pastime I don't really like. I may even disagree with the Lord. It's my right. I have independence. It's one part of the pastime I don't like, but why did he do it? He did it for the good of the citizens. Because if the king doesn't have a good reputation, how can he rule the kingdom? And I understand there was some stupid washerman who was complaining about Sita Devi, who knows what she did, when she was a year with Ravan. I understand all that. But still, society is composed of stupid people. If you think that most people in society are intelligent enough to pick a leader, you got some problems there. I mean, you haven't read the news recently. That just recently, anyway, I guess I get a little current events as part of class. Recently there was a interview on television in some other country which shall remain nameless. And the person who was being interviewed, he's a candidate for a particular office, and he was showing himself to be a buffoon. You know what a buffoon is? Buffoon. And all of his followers were cheering at the same time. Oh, Jai Maharaj, I'm just taking it out of the context right then. Jai Maharaj, Jai Maharaj. Because people are stupid. Even there's that story with Prabhupada, and it's not to criticize any devotees, but Prabhupada was walking down on his morning walk, and he saw the devotees passed a very nice car, and Prabhupada said, in the future we'll have many nice cars. Nowadays, many nice Teslas. Anyway, so Prabhupada said, we'll have many nice big cars, and the devotee said, Jai Prabhupada. And then they walked past some really nice buildings, the future will have many temples, big buildings, Jai Prabhupada. And then they walked by some guy walking a big dog. Prabhupada said, in the future we'll have so many dogs. And the devotee said, Jai Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, you're so foolish. Everything I say, you'll say Jai for. So, the point being is that most people in this world, especially in Kali Yuga, problems. Kalo Shudra Sambhava. Everyone's a Shudra. So, if you have people elect, what's that? If you have people elect a leader, even during the Treta Yuga, like you see, this guy was a Shudra.
Yeah.
And the majority of people will always be Shudras. In Kali Yuga, everyone's a Shudra. And only samskara bhavetrijam. Of course, janmana jayate Shudra. Samskara bhavetrijam. Only by the proper samskaras can one become twice born. Samskaras, and also they have to follow the samskaras. It's not that you get your Brahman initiation and then all of a sudden you're a Brahmin. No. Come on, that's kind of stupid. It's like giving someone a position and thinking they are that position. So anyway, so therefore, because most of the people are Shudras in any age basically, except for the Satya Yuga, but Lord Ram appeared in Treta Yuga, then elections really don't work that well. This, as we're seeing in the world, isn't it? All over the world, in every country they do. And people vote because of what the person is offering them, and because of their own emotions, or because the person is very handsome or pretty. That happened. In America we had Kennedy was elected because he was handsome. He looked better than the other guy. Definitely. I mean, the other guy looked like a used car salesman. So people vote for the wrong reasons. They're stupid. I mean, every day that's brought to home to my consciousness just by reading the news how stupid people are. Now, that's not a criticism of people, it's just an observation. So therefore, it was the king's responsibility to arrange things for the good of the citizens. And so the marriage had to be arranged for the good of the citizens. That's all. Simple thing like that. And so the king had to sacrifice his own personal happiness or his like love marriages. Of course, Krishna had many love marriages. But that's Krishna. You don't find Krishna having an arranged marriage. Krishna arranged his own marriages. By the process of what's called Rakshasa marriage. Some of them were Rakshasa, some of them were Gandharva, some of them were regular Swayamvar. Rakshasa means kidnapping. Krishna arranged Arjuna's marriage with Subhadra by the process of kidnapping too. And so, yeah, so we do see instances where people arrange their own marriages, even kings, and it's a disaster. Like you take Shantanu, for example, in the Mahabharata. Shantanu, arranged his first marriage with Ganga Devi. Of course, it was part of the Lord's pastimes. I understand that. But he just fell in love with her. Wrong reason to get married. Sorry about that, you romantic people. The wrong reason to get married is falling in love. So he fell in love with Ganga Devi, and he was so much in love, he didn't even hear when Ganga Devi said, "You never have to disobey me or argue with me, or else I'm leaving." He just thought, "Oh, isn't that sweet?" That shows the danger of falling in love, isn't it? Because you lose your brain. It's described even by people who've done MRIs, MRIs, that it's like taking cocaine. It has the same effect on the brain. You can see the same areas of the brain being lit up when one falls in love, one snorts cocaine. Should be made illegal to fall in love. The police will arrest you. So Shantanu falls in love, and then he just sits quietly. Come on. Your kids are being killed, one kid after another, thrown into the Ganges, isn't it? Wow. I mean, how would you tolerate such a thing like that? But I don't want her to leave me. Come on, Prabhu. And then later on, he gets married to Satyavati. I mean, he gets attracted to Satyavati. She was quite attractive too. She was known as Gandha Yojana because she had nice smell without perfume. And that was given by Parashara Muni, but that's a whole other story. So, and then he becomes depressed because he can't get married. Then we have Bhishma having to take this vow, which was ultimately created a disaster, but it was part of the Lord's plan. I understand all that. Part of the Lord's plan. And because the father was just so attached, he was in a deep depression. So you see what love does? This is not a sannyas class, don't worry. I'm just telling you practically about this world. Just practically, it's a practical point. I mean, one has to be attached, just like is mentioned here, to Dharma, doing the right thing. So what do you deal with this, with these emotions that just come up like that and overtake your intelligence? Avritam jnanametena jnanino nityavayana kamarupena kontya dushprena lena cha, as Bhagavad Gita says, isn't it? It's like, burns like fire, these things. One has to apply their intelligence. One has to know the philosophy. Therefore, that's what a sage is. He says, the child will be the father of kings who will be like sages. So what's the difference between a sage and someone who is uncontrolled senses, is the sage is able to use his intelligence to do the right thing. Sometimes the sage will have impulses to do the wrong thing, but he's more intelligent, just like we find the first verse, not the first verse, yeah, actually the first verse. Vacho vegam manasakroda vegam jiva vegam udara pashta vegam. Isn't it? That one should learn to tolerate the pushings of these different senses. The tongue, belly, genitals, mind, anger, and words. Upadeshamrita, of course. That's where it comes from. So one must learn to tolerate. So the king, a sage, is one who tolerates these impulses. And so certainly the king has impulses because the king is actually a Kshatriya. Kshatriya is under the influence of the mode of passion. So therefore he definitely has impulses. It's not that he's just like callous to all sorts of feelings, but he controls it with higher intelligence. And also the king takes the advice of the Brahmins. So it's not an absolute monarchy. Nowadays, the modern monarchies are just figureheads, isn't it? Like you find there was recently a coronation. You heard about that? And everybody's going there cheering, whatever. But the guy has no power, except they have a lot of money. And then they have fighting in the family, just like the Mahabharata War, isn't it? It's interesting to watch. I mean, it's really interesting to watch that royal family fighting each other. And then I think still here in Australia you have the Queen and the bill.
We still recognize her.
There's no logical reason for it. It's just like a tradition.
Too hard to change.
Of course, there's no queen anymore. Yeah, but there's the
King's holiday. No?
there's the king's consort or something like that, the royal consort. So anyway, one has to use the intelligence. You may have these different impulses, and so getting back to another verse, a word in this verse, you have this shasta, chastiser. So this is a very interesting word. It comes from the shash dhatu. Shash dhatu is actually a very important word in our Vaishnava, or a root of a word. It basically means control. You understand? Shash. So we have different words that come from this word. One is shastra. You understand? Shastra, because we're supposed to be controlled by shastra. And another word is shastra, which means the stick, the chastisement, which is also mentioned here. He cuts down the chastiser of the upstarts and the quarrelsome for world peace. So this is the sort of leader that we need, and therefore there has to be some proper breeding to get the person. Not only breeding, but nurture. There's two things, nature and nurture, that determine a person. And nature, of course, is what you're born with, and nurture is what happens after you're born. And of course, in one sense, nurture is more important than nature. Because by nature, you can actually be a great devotee, but by nurture, you can become a demon. In other words, you can be born in a first-class devotee family, like Boma was born, and by association, he became a demon, Bomasura, and he had to be killed by his father, Krishna. So, both things are important, and this is the requirement for leaders of different countries, leaders of the world. And how do we apply this to ourselves? Well, basically, we have to have the same qualities to be devotees, like kings and like sages. It's interesting. I'm not just saying sages. Because in Kali Yuga, or at least as members of Srila Prabhupada's society, we have to be like Kshatriyas in one sense. Like Prabhupada said, we should be like, there's another verse, or purport, Prabhupada was saying we have to be like lions on the chase and lambs at home. Prabhupada also used that to refer to ladies who were going out in Sankirtan, distributing books. Not only to men, he used it in relationship to men too. He said ladies who are going out in Sankirtan to distribute books, they have to be bold. Normally, like Prabhupada would always praise a lady for her shyness. Prabhupada said a shy lady gets great respect. Whereas, a lady who's always a loud mouth doesn't get such great respect.
You're gonna have news articles printed soon. You're gonna have more news articles printed all over.
All over, oh my God. No, this is Prabhupada, I'm just quoting from Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said that, if a lady is shy, it's actually, she's very respected like that. She's chaste and shy. And then, but Prabhupada sent his female disciples out to distribute books. And they had to be bold. I mean, some of Prabhupada's disciples, lady disciples, distributed like millions of books or hundreds of thousands of books. And Prabhupada was asked, what about ladies being shy? Prabhupada said they have to be like lions on the chase, or in this case, lionesses on the chase, and lambs at home. Well, because it's hard to switch gears like that. Because you get home, after a day of book distribution, you start to preach to your husband. You're a Maya, you rascal. And you're like a hog, dog, camel, or an ass. It can be quite dangerous. So, but in general, Prabhupada wanted us to have certain Kshatriya qualities. Prabhupada himself indicated that he wanted to die on the battlefield, or leave this world on the battlefield. And he probably at one point said, we want devotees like Arjuna, not sit-down people. We sit down for class, but sit down in the sense of just like relax and become Babaji. Prabhupada was so strong against people, or preaching against people, or the process of going just to India and just retiring and just chanting. And he said those who simply go and do that, they're eating the mind's bananas. There's an interesting poem that Prabhupada wrote called Vrindavan Bhajan that, I ask you all to read sometime. I got in trouble for reading it one time because I read it out loud. People got really upset because it's really heavy about. So in other words, that's what Prabhupada wanted. So even though we may not have such good breeding, Prabhupada said everyone in Kali Yuga is mixed castes of unknown heritage. So by taking up this process of Krishna consciousness, then we can become like kings that are also sages. And that's what Prabhupada expected of us. At least if you want to make quick advancement, that's the secret. In addition to chanting your rounds nicely, having good sadhana, and hearing from Srila Prabhupada on a regular basis, reading Prabhupada's books. All right, so any questions or comments? Yes.
Gurudev, so today you were mentioning about how actually in one of the classes you were saying one of the devotees when they were on the streets, they were preaching, saying to everyone, like, don't be like hogs.
Yeah, that's not good.
Okay.
You can't, I mean, sometimes it's appropriate. It may be appropriate in a certain circumstance, but when you approach a new person, you have to understand who you're talking to, what their mentality is. I always, or try to really hear about where someone is at before I talk to them. Because usually it'll be inappropriate if I don't hear about where they're at. And Prabhupada did the same thing. In a general class, you can be really heavy. You see that with Prabhupada. In a general class, Prabhupada spoke really heavy. But when he was dealing individually with people, it was more, in tune with who they were, rather than just like. But sometimes Prabhupada would heavy people out. There was one Sanskrit professor one time who came to see Prabhupada, and the first thing Prabhupada says, why are you cheating people? The poor guy, because Prabhupada knew. Prabhupada is not like me, where I have to ask people a few questions to find out where they're at before I can know. But Prabhupada knew the heart of the person, and it was appropriate. It was appropriate, and sometimes Prabhupada would use jokes too with people, just to bring a point. Prabhupada knew exactly according to time, place, and he's an expert. That's one of the qualities of relation of it. Expert judge of time, place, and circumstance. So yeah, obviously, there was a devotee. He used to just directly quote Prabhupada's books to everybody, and he burned people out in the streets. We don't tell people you're like a hog, dog, cow, or an ass, even though it's probably true, according to Shastra. Because there's the point I made in the class that you're referring to is that there's the austerities of speech. Satya, priya, hitam. Truthful, pleasing, beneficial. Satya, true. Priya, pleasing. Hitam, beneficial to the person. Does that make sense? Okay, any other questions before we go on with life? Yeah.
Maharaj, is there a qualification to distribute the books? Like, does one should read a book before it distributes that?
Prabhupada wanted us to read the books. One time Prabhupada said, it's not a good idea when you go out to Sankirtan and someone asks what's in the book and you say, I don't know, I just distribute. But we also have faith. I mean, devotees used to distribute books like the Chaitanya Charitamrita when it first came out, and they hadn't read the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita at that point. So we have faith. These are Prabhupada's words, and even if someone puts the book on the bookshelf and gives it a respectable position on the bookshelf, they're going to make spiritual advancement. So we have that much faith. But yes, we should read the books. Prabhupada said the books are mainly for the disciples and devotees of the movement to read. So Prabhupada said we're not just booksellers. But anyway, at the same time, we should be bold. I remember one of my godbrothers, Vaisheshika Prabhu, who you probably have heard about, he is so bold. I've been on Sankirtan with him. I went out, and one time, I think it was about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, before COVID, on the streets of Chicago to distribute books. And, me, I was just saying, sir, can you stop? Whatever. But he was getting everyone to stop. He would run up to the cars at the stoplight and in like 10 seconds distribute a book and get money from the person. It was like magic. He was bold, not obnoxious bold, but just sweet. Everybody liked it. I don't know if anyone's seen him distribute books. It was amazing. He's really empowered. So he'd just go up, and he taught me some tricks too. Just tricks, but I'm not as bold as him. So a devotee is abhaya sattva samshuddhi jnana yoga vastati. A devotee doesn't have any fear. So he one of the tricks he taught me in book distribution is when you see someone, like let's say they're 20 meters away, you wave to them like you know them. Hi, yeah. And generally, the people don't want to say, I don't know you. They, say hi. It's thinking, I must know him, but it's really embarrassing for me to say, I don't know him. So I have to act like I know him. Oh, yeah. And by that time, he has a book in his hand. And the other hand in his wallet to give a donation. But that's an expert person. But so Prabhupada very much appreciated that. I mean, not cheating people. Prabhupada never wanted us to cheat people. Prabhupada wanted us to distribute books on the basis of what's in the books, not on some cheating propensity. But there's a story of someone who was bold, and Prabhupada. Look how bold Prabhupada was. Look how bold Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was. But Prabhupada, on an individual basis with his disciples, was really soft like a thunderbolt, soft like a rose, hard as a thunderbolt in certain circumstances. So Prabhupada said, that's actually the statement of Lord Chaitanya. Hard as a thunderbolt sometimes and soft as a rose. So we should develop that art. And, everybody in the movement, as far as possible, is meant to preach Krishna consciousness. Reach out to others. That's what Yari Dekatarika Krishna Padesham, Yari Gari Guru Hoi Tori Desh. That's what Lord Chaitanya said. Everyone. I mean, how else are we going to spread the movement? If you just wait for the sannyasis to preach, you're not going to make many devotees. So each and every one of you should have an assignment to bring many people to Krishna. So why? Why not? Otherwise the movement will just increase arithmetically. You understand? Arithmetically. 1, 2, 3, 4. But we want the movement to increase exponentially. Just like you have this thing called multi-level marketing. Ever heard about that before? Why does it become so successful? Because it's exponential growth. If one person gets, 5 people follow him, and each of those 5 people get 5 people following him, and each of those 5 people get 5 people following him, then all of a sudden, of course, multi-level marketing, the only way you make money is if you're in the beginning. But in Krishna consciousness, you get money at every stage. Not money, but you get Krishna conscious wealth at every stage. Krishna conscious money, which is pure devotional service. Because there's no lack. In multi-level marketing, there's only a certain amount of money that's available. And the people on the lower end get it all, who get most of it. But in Krishna consciousness, it's available to everyone because the more you give, the more you have. There's no lack. Okay, I think it's time to end. Krishna. Okay. What's that? One more question, yeah.
If you
Yeah.
mind. Sorry, Maharaj. You were explaining that samskara bhavet vijaha.
Yeah,
Like
samskara. Yeah,
Samskaras, I know they get
Bhavet
accumulated
Vijaya.
over millions of lifetimes.
yeah,
Other than obviously chanting and
yeah,
studying
yeah.
some of the scripts, can you give some practical tips which would eventually help one to develop good samskaras? Or
Yeah, the word samskar is an interesting word. Sang means complete or perfect, just like you have sankirtan. Skara comes from the kriti, which means action. It means perfect action. But to understand what it, in context, it indicates an action that creates an impression on the subtle body and the mind and the soul and everything like that. So generally we think of samskaras as just some ceremony, like Garbhadan sanskar, Vivaha samskara, Namakarana, a GHD. But samskaras actually occur throughout our lives. I mean, every moment, basically. So it's important to, sadhu sangha, sarvasashakar. It's important to always have good association. And like Lord Chaitanya was asked, what is the quality of a Vaishnava? And the first thing he answered was in the negative. He said, a satsanga chage Vaishnavachar, to give up bad association. Because bad association is a samskara, but a negative samskara. So if we give up bad association, then take up good association, then we'll always be in contact. Like Prabhupada said, an iron rod in contact with the fire becomes fire. So then our consciousness becomes purified. So we can't, we shouldn't underestimate how dangerous bad association is. I mean, just like yesterday I was in an airplane and I happened to glance at someone's movie screen for a few seconds. And then, just like some impression like that. I remember the movie. And it was, and then last night I dreamt of that same movie. So that, we don't understand how different impressions can influence our subtle body. Yeah. I mean, just look at something for a few minutes. I mean, of course, I'm not trying to make everyone paranoid. You can't look at anything for a few minutes. But we have to be careful. I mean, obviously it didn't take me away from Krishna consciousness. Just by seeing some airplanes crash, you know, it wasn't, you know, you see the action on the screen, and it actually is, it's a little interesting. It's interesting. So, yeah, so therefore, I'm not saying there was anything wrong in what I did, because then I'd be chastising myself. But anyway, so, but it just indicates, you know, how much impressions influence our consciousness. So somehow or other, life should be a positive samskara, rather than just wait for the initiation samskara. Initiation is just one moment. And it's the reason you have all these ceremonies is to give more of an impression. Like we were talking, the other day we were talking about this with marriages. The reason you have a 3-day or a 5-day marriage is that it gives more of an impression. I mean, and if you just have like a 10-second marriage, you go to the, you know, to the registrar. Isn't it?
Yeah.
And you say, okay, that's marriage. Yeah. There's no impression. One's not going to take it so seriously. So therefore, that's the reason for a long marriage. You know, the real point is the dedication and sticking to one's promises. But unless you have a ceremony, people don't do that. So the real point, even with initiation, is that's the point, is making the promise and the connection. But you got to have the ceremony, because people generally are not Brahminical. What can I say? They function on the basis of having an impression, and also being worried what their relatives are going to say after they spent millions of dollars in the marriage. Can you imagine that? You invite all the relatives and say, well, it just didn't work out. You know, that's why you have long marriages in India. That's the reason. Otherwise, I mean, what's the need for so much? I mean, I remember being in one marriage, and it was, where was it? South India, and it was the summer. It was like, what was it, like 35 degrees. Everyone was sweltering and pouring days and days. I didn't sit through the whole thing, but it was just like, you can imagine what it was like. And they're all sitting there. So like, they'll remember that marriage for the rest of their lives. It's called PTSD, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder. So that couple is fixed. You know, what we had to go through to get you married, you know. The parents go into debt. We get the daughters married, isn't it? Heavy. Okay, on that happy note, we should end, because I got to do my deity worship, and I guess there's no work today.
No.
It's Saturday.
Well, some people.
Some people work. Some people are fortunate enough to work. I have to work today too. There's no vacation, no retirement, and there'll be prasadam here too for everybody, right? Prasadam for
Yeah,
everybody.
prasadam for everybody.
But I got to do my deity worship now. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Gurudev, a quick introduction.
Oh,
for
introduction.
Those who, there's a lot of new people. I don't know, and I don't know.
Okay, let's do an introduction. Well, actually, let me show people online where we are. So, what's the introduction?
That's Anshu, in some ways Naveen, who the host here. They look after Gurudev. I'm Navadvip. And I guess we'll start from here so everybody knows who's who. Probably.
Hare Krishna, I'm Pramana Das. Hare Krishna, my name is Kapil Dev Das.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
My name is Kiran.
Kiran?
Shigaokar.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, my name is Rajesh. I'm from Melbourne.
Melbourne. The country of Melbourne.
I'm Shamapriya, new disciple.
I know, I figured that one out.
Shastra.
Shastra.
From India, and he was wondering if he could take initiation, and so he came to see you and guidance.
Guidance.
For that.
Yeah, guidance. Yeah.
Yes.
You're staying here now, or?
Yes.
Okay. That's good. Okay, yeah, we can talk, keep in contact. Who else don't we know?
name is Rita. Hare Krishna.
Oh, Brenda.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Shantini Devi,
Yeah, I know.
It's
That
more
I-
for each other.
You know, the people, oh, for each other, because I know a lot of the
Yeah,
people, there.
you
Especially
gather
the
for
disciples I know, you know.
I think it's more for others to know
Okay.
who.
Oh, I'm Jaya Radhika Devidasi.
She's always at the temple.
Devidasi, so I've just relocated from Auckland. This is my cousin Nirwani, Mang's
Yeah.
brother's daughter, Guru Maharaj.
Just
So I'm
relocated. That's nice.
Um,
I'm surprised.
temporary.
Surprised.
Yeah,
Temporary.
temporary. I was going to email you, but
Oh.
Krishna Chandra said Guru Maharaj will say no. So he said Guru Maharaj will stay in Auckland. So I said, okay, then when I've relocated, then I'll just inform Guru Maharaj that I've moved.
Temporary or?
It's temporary, Guru Maharaj. Auckland will always be home because mom and dad are there.
Yeah.
And my eldest senior citizens are there that I take care of. So
Yes, okay. That's good. That's good. Sometimes, yeah, people do things first and then they get permission.
only because Krishna Chandra said you'll say no.
I don't know. I mean, if it's just temporary, it sounds all right. All right. Who else? Who else? Well, everyone, even people I know, should introduce themselves.
Hare Krishna, I am Tattva Das.
I figured that one out. Yeah,
Hare Krishna, I am Ashtika Das.
yeah, very good.
Hare Krishna, Jayadharma Das.
Yes, I know.
Hare Krishna, Satsanga Das.
There is something.
Hare Krishna, I'm Tara. I'm from Melbourne. Hare Krishna, I'm Manasvi Devidasi.
Cindy.
Hare Krishna Govinda Moini.
I didn't know that.
Hare Krishna and Divya Gopika.
They're very nice.
Hare Krishna, Praveen.
Praveen.
Hare Krishna Prabhu Radhika.
Okay. What about the children?
Children are here. They're hiding away. This is Isha.
Isha,
Hare Krishna.
she's from here.
She lives here. This is Anshu. She's the host.
She's the host. Hostess.
Naveen won't come ahead, but Naveen's there. Keshav did Artiya. Gonna say the name?
Yeah. Shy.
This is Kana. This is my son. This is Radhe, my daughter. This is Taruni, another daughter. I think that's
No, she's Guru Sharna's daughter.
That's it.
Yeah.
So there's Guru Sharma.
Here's Guru Sharna.
Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming for the morning program.
This prasadam, don't go without prasadam.
Okay.
Thank you, Gurudev.
All right. We'll see you all. I got to do my deity worship. Let's see what they say.
This side. I'll